Commander Thexanor stood at the front of the training hall, his four arms crossed over his massive chest. His chitinous armor gleamed under the bright lights, natural plates that had protected his kind for millions of years. He was 8 feet tall, built like a living tank, and his species had never lost a war. Around him stood 200 new recruits, the finest warriors from across the Galactic Coalition. They were impressive, Vraxians with scales like steel and claws that could tear through metal, Korthans with 6 legs and reaction times faster than thought, Brel warriors whose thick hides could stop plasma fire. Each species had evolved as predators, as fighters, as survivors of harsh worlds. And then there were the humans. Thexanor's eyes found them easily. They stood in a small group near the back, barely reaching the chests of the warriors around them. Their skin looked soft, pale, and fragile, like the underbelly of a cave creature. No scales, no armor, no claws or fangs. They wore simple military uniforms that seemed too thin to protect them from anything. There were 20 of them, 15 males and 5 females, though Thexanor barely understood the distinction. They all looked equally weak to him. A ripple of laughter moved through the hall. A massive Vraxian named Krath turned to look at the humans, his lips pulling back to show rows of sharp teeth. "Are those the humans?" Krath asked loudly. "I thought they were sending warriors, not food." More laughter. Even some of Thexanor's own officers smiled. The commander said nothing, but privately, he agreed. When Earth had joined the Coalition 6 months ago, he had reviewed their military history. They fought each other constantly, their own kind, with primitive weapons. They had no natural defenses. Their homeworld was soft and easy, not like the volcanic hell of Krell or the frozen wastes of Vrax. One of the humans, a female with dark hair pulled back tight, met Thexanor's eyes. She did not look away. Her name tag read, Rodriguez. She stood at attention, her back straight, her face calm. Something about her gaze made Thexanor uncomfortable, though he could not say why. "Recruits," Thexanor's voice boomed across the hall. "You are here to become Coalition soldiers. For the next 12 weeks, you will train. You will fight. Many of you will fail. Those who succeed will face real combat against real enemies. The Zelthric swarm does not care about your pride or your species. They will kill you without thought." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Today we begin with physical assessment. You will be tested on strength, speed, endurance, and combat ability. Follow your squad leaders." The hall emptied in organized chaos. Thexanor watched the humans follow their assigned leader, a Krellan officer named Vex. The young warrior looked embarrassed to be assigned the human unit. The first test was simple: lifting. Each recruit had to lift a weight bar loaded with standard plates. The Vraxians lifted it easily over their heads. The Korthans managed it with all 6 limbs. Even the smaller species could handle the weight with effort. The first human to try was a male named Chen. He was average height for his species, perhaps 5 feet and 9 inches, with black hair and a lean build. He approached the bar, gripped it, and pulled. The bar moved perhaps 2 inches off the ground before he had to drop it, breathing hard. Krath, who had lifted the same weight with one arm, laughed so hard he had to hold his stomach. "Weak," Krath said. "Pathetically weak." Chen's face turned red, but he said nothing. He simply moved aside for the next human. None of them could lift the standard weight. Rodriguez came closest, managing to get it to her knees before her arms gave out. The other species watched with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. The speed trials were no better. Humans ran the course in times that placed them in the bottom 15%. Their endurance was average at best. When it came to durability testing, where recruits had to withstand simulated weapon impacts, the humans bruised and bled from impacts that barely bothered other species. But it was the combat trials that truly showed the gap. Thexanor watched from an observation platform as recruits entered the sparring ring. They wore protective gear and used training weapons, But injuries were common and expected. Warriors needed to learn their limits. Chen stepped into the ring. His opponent was Krath, the massive Vraxian who had mocked him earlier. "This is not fair," Vex said quietly beside Texanor. "The size difference is too great." "War is not fair," Vexanor replied. "The human needs to learn that." The match began. Krath moved with surprising speed for his size, crossing the ring in 2 steps. Chen tried to dodge, and he was faster than Thexanor expected, but not fast enough. Krath's clawed hand caught him across the chest, and the human flew backward, hitting the wall with a sound that made everyone wince. Chen lay still for a moment. Medical officers started toward the ring, but then the human moved. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself to his feet. Blood ran down his chin from where he had bitten his lip. His protective vest had split where Krath's claws had struck. "Stay down," Krath called. "You have lost." Chen raised his fists again. He could barely stand, swaying on his feet, but his eyes were clear and focused. Krath looked confused, then annoyed. He crossed the ring again and struck Chen with an open palm. Not claws this time, but still enough force to send the human sprawling. Chen hit the ground hard. This time, Thexnor thought it was over. But again the human rose. His movements were slower now, his face pale except for the blood and the bruises already forming. "He does not know when to quit," Vex observed. "That is because he is stupid," Thexnor said, but he leaned forward, watching closely. Krath looked to the officials. "Is this match over?" The referee looked uncertain. Chen was clearly outmatched, but he had not surrendered, and he kept standing. "One more," Krath growled. He moved forward and this time used his full strength, hitting Chen with a punch that would have killed an unprotected human. Chen's protective vest absorbed most of it, but the impact still drove the air from his lungs and sent him sliding across the floor. Chen did not get up this time. He lay on his back, gasping for air like a drowning man. Medical officers rushed in. They loaded Chen onto a stretcher. As they carried him past Thexnor's platform, the human turned his head. Despite the pain, despite the defeat, Chen looked up at Krath and showed his teeth. It was not a smile. It was something else, something that made the Vraxian take a step back. Rodriguez and the other humans watched their comrade carried away. None of them looked surprised. None of them looked afraid. They simply waited their turn. By the end of the day, every human had been defeated in combat. They ranked at the bottom in nearly every physical category. The medical bay was full of them, being treated for injuries that other species would not have received. Thexnor reviewed the results in his office. The data was clear. Humans were simply not built for war. They were too weak, too slow, too fragile. He would have to assign them to support roles, maintenance, logistics, communications, things that would keep them away from real combat where they would only get themselves killed. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Rodriguez walked in. She had a bandage wrapped around her left arm and a bruise darkening her cheek, but she stood straight and sharp. "Commander," she said, "I want to request something." "Speak." "The war games next week. I want my unit to participate." Thexnor almost laughed. The war games were brutal, a 72-hour tactical exercise across Krell 7's volcanic terrain. Even experienced soldiers found them difficult. "Your performance today suggests otherwise," he said carefully. "We know we're not the strongest," Rodriguez replied. Her voice was steady, her eyes meeting his without flinching. "But strength isn't everything. Give us a chance, one chance to prove we belong here." Thexnor studied her. There was something in her voice, something he had heard before from the most dangerous warriors he had known. Certainty. Absolute, unshakable certainty. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "Very well. You will participate. I will even make it interesting." He pulled up the tactical map. "You will defend position Gamma 7. You will be given standard equipment, and you will face 3 opposing teams." He watched Rodriguez's face carefully. Position Gamma 7 was known as the impossible position among the training staff. It had never been successfully defended. Rodriguez smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Thank you, Commander. We won't disappoint you." As she left, Thexnor shook his head. The humans would learn their lesson soon enough. War was not about determination or spirit. It was about strength, about natural advantage, about being the superior predator. At least, that was what he believed. He had 12 weeks until the War Games. He suspected the humans would not last 12 hours. The War Games began at dawn. Thexnor stood in the command center, watching dozens of screens that showed different areas of the volcanic terrain. Each screen tracked a different team through their helmet cameras and overhead drones. 3 teams would attack position Gamma 7. The Varaxian team, led by Krath, aggressive and powerful. The Korthan Speed Unit, fast and coordinated. And a mixed team of Krellin and Brel warriors, heavily armored and experienced. 90 warriors in total, all veterans of at least one combat deployment. Against them, 20 humans with outdated equipment and no combat experience. Thexnor had given the humans exactly what they requested. Standard gear, standard weapons, standard supplies. Nothing special. He had also given them the worst defensive position on the entire planet. Gamma 7 sat in a narrow valley between 2 volcanic ridges, with limited cover and multiple attack routes. Every training session that used this position ended the same way. The defenders were overrun within 6 hours. "The humans have reached their position," Vex reported. The young Krellin officer was acting as observer for this exercise. "They are setting up defenses now." Thexnor watched the human team spread out. Rodriguez directed them with hand signals, keeping radio chatter minimal. They moved efficiently, he noted. Each human seemed to know their role without being told. "How long do you think they will last?" another officer asked. 6 hours, Thexnor replied. "Perhaps 8 if they are clever." The first 12 hours passed quietly. The attacking teams moved into position, scouting the terrain and planning their assault. This was standard. Real combat required patience and preparation. But Thexnor noticed something odd. The human position showed minimal activity, no radio communications, no visible movement. Their heat signatures had disappeared from the thermal scans. "Where are they?" he demanded. Vex worked the controls, cycling through different sensor modes. I do not know, Commander. The thermal camouflage they deployed is more effective than expected, and they have stopped using electronic communications entirely. They cannot simply vanish." "No, Commander, but they can hide very well." Hour 18 arrived. The Korthan team, confident and fast, made their approach. They moved down the main valley in a loose formation, their 6 legs carrying them quickly over the rough ground. Their sensors showed the valley was empty. They were wrong. The explosion caught 3 Korthons in its blast radius. Not real explosives, but training charges that marked them as casualties and locked their armor. The rest of the team scattered, seeking cover. Then the shooting started. Not from obvious positions, but from camouflage spots in the rock walls, from beneath layers of volcanic ash, from angles that should not have been possible. The human weapons were not powerful enough to penetrate Korthan armor easily, but they did not need to be. The rules of the exercise were clear. Enough hits in the right places counted as kills. 5 more Korthons were marked as casualties before their team leader called a retreat. 8 casualties in less than 3 minutes. "Rewind that," Thexnor ordered. They watched the footage again. The humans had dug shallow fighting positions into the volcanic rock and covered them with local materials. They had set tripwired explosives along the likely approach routes. They had established overlapping fields of fire that created a kill zone in the valley. "When did they do this?" Thexnor asked. "We have been watching their position." "During the first 12 hours, Commander, while it was still dark." "The first night?" "But that was when other teams were resting and regrouping." Vex pulled up the human biometric data. "Sir, the humans have not rested. Not once. Their heart rates show they have been continuously active since the exercise began." Fexnor felt something cold move down his spine. 18 hours without rest? That should not be possible. Even Krellin warriors needed to rest after 12 hours of sustained activity. Hour 24 came. The Vraxian team, angry about the Korthan losses, decided on a direct assault. Krath led them himself, charging the human position from 3 directions at once. It should have worked. Vraxians were strong enough to tear through most obstacles and tough enough to absorb enormous punishment. 30 Vraxians hit the human defensive line like a hammer. The humans fell back, not in panic, but in an organized retreat, moving from position to position, always firing, always moving. They led the Vraxians deeper into the valley, into terrain the humans had prepared. More explosives, sniper fire from concealed positions. A Vraxian warrior stepped on a covered pit and fell in, marked as casualty. Another triggered a rock slide that swept away 3 more. But the Vraxians kept coming. They were too strong, too determined. They reached the main human bunker, a reinforced position built into the valley wall. The bunker was empty. "Where are they?" Krath roared over the radio. Behind them. The humans had circled around using hidden paths through the volcanic rock. Now they hit the Vraxians from behind, from their undefended rear. 12 Vraxians were marked as casualties before Krath could reorganize. He called a retreat. His team had lost 15 warriors. The survivors were angry and frustrated. "The humans fight like cowards," Krath complained over the command channel. "They hide and run. They do not stand and fight." Fexnor did not respond. He was too busy watching the human positions. Rodriguez was splitting her force, sending small teams to different locations, setting up new traps, preparing for the next assault. She had lost only 2 humans so far, both from the Vraxian attack. Hour 36 arrived. Fexnor had not left the command center. He could not look away. The humans were doing something he had never seen before. They did not fight like other species. They did not rely on strength or armor or natural weapons. They used the terrain. They used darkness. They used deception and traps and patience. They fought smart, not hard. "Commander," Vex said quietly, "the humans are still active. They have not rested for 36 hours. Medical recommends we check on them." "Are any of them injured?" "Minor wounds only, but their bodies must be exhausted. Then they will rest when they need to." Fexnor leaned forward. "All teams, prepare for coordinated assault. All 3 teams will attack together at hour 40. If the humans could not be defeated separately, they would be overwhelmed by numbers." Hour 40 came. 90 warriors minus the casualties already taken. Approximately 65 warriors converged on the human position from all sides at once. It was overwhelming force, the kind of assault that should crush any defense. The humans were ready. They had prepared fallback positions, layered defenses that forced the attackers to fight through multiple lines. They used the volcanic terrain perfectly, turning every rock and ridge into cover. They moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be pinned down. Chen, the human who had been beaten so badly by Krath on the first day, held a narrow pass alone for 20 minutes. He used a damaged training rifle and threw rocks when his ammunition ran low. He marked 8 casualties before he had to retreat. A human female named Torres climbed to the top of a thermal vent and provided sniper cover, her position so exposed that it seemed suicidal. But the heat from the vent masked her thermal signature, and the angle gave her shots on attackers who thought they were safe. She held that position for an hour before enemy fire forced her down. Rodriguez herself led a counterattack that caught the Krellin team by surprise. Her squad moved through a lava tube that other species considered too small, emerging behind enemy lines and creating chaos. Hour 48 arrived. The command center had grown crowded. Other officers had come to watch. Some brought their students. Everyone wanted to see the impossible. humans holding a position that had never been held before. Their performance is impressive, Vex admitted, but they must be near collapse. No species can maintain this pace. Vexner checked the biometric data again. The humans showed signs of extreme fatigue. Their movements were slower. Their aim was less accurate. But they had not stopped. Not once in 48 hours. They are using stimulants, a medical officer reported. The human medics are administering chemical compounds to keep their soldiers alert and active. Is that legal? It is not prohibited by exercise rules, but it is concerning. Those chemicals will have side effects. The humans are pushing their bodies beyond safe limits. Fexner watched Rodriguez on the screen. She moved like she was injured, favoring one leg. Her face was pale and covered in dust and ash, but her eyes were alert, scanning the terrain, planning her next move. Hour 60 arrived. The three attacking teams held a conference. They had lost 40% of their starting force. 40%. Against 20 humans with inferior equipment. This is not acceptable, Kraft said over the command channel. We will combine all remaining forces for one final assault. We end this now. All three teams joined together, 45 warriors in one massive formation. They would hit the human position from all sides at once with overwhelming force. No traps, no tricks, no clever tactics could stop this. The assault began at hour 62. Fexner watched in silence. The humans were clearly at their limit. They had been fighting for nearly 3 days without rest. Their ammunition was low. Their positions were damaged. They should have been defeated hours ago. But they kept fighting. A human named Jackson held a bunker alone when his squad mates had to fall back. He fought hand-to-hand when his weapon broke, using a training knife against Vraxian warriors 3 times his size. He marked 2 casualties before he was finally overwhelmed and marked as casualty himself. Rodriguez gathered her remaining soldiers, 12 humans still standing. They had one defensive position left, a small fortified area that should have held maybe 5 warriors comfortably. "Commander," she said over the radio, her voice hoarse and tired, "we are requesting immediate medical evacuation for our casualties." "Denied," Thexnor replied. He had to see how this ended. The exercise continues until hour 72 or until one side surrenders. There was silence on the radio. Then Rodriguez laughed. It was a tired, almost delirious sound. "Understood, Commander. Then we will see you in 10 hours. The final assault hit the human position like a meteor. 45 warriors against 12 humans. The fighting was brutal and close. Explosions, gunfire, the sound of hand-to-hand combat. When the dust settled, 20 warriors had been marked as casualties. 20. The humans had made every meter of ground cost dearly, but numbers eventually won. The remaining attackers overran the human position. Rodriguez was the last human standing, her back against a wall, her weapon empty. She raised her hands in surrender. The exercise timer showed hour 67. Fexnor stood slowly. The command center was absolutely silent. Every officer, every student, every observer stared at the screens in disbelief. The humans had not won, but they had held for 67 hours. They had inflicted devastating casualties. They had turned an impossible position into a fortress. And they had done it without rest, without complaint, without ever giving up. "Get medical teams to that position immediately," Fexnor ordered, "and prepare transport for all human personnel." He walked to the landing pad where his shuttle waited. He needed to see this himself. When he arrived at Gamma 7, the humans were being loaded onto medical transports. Most could barely walk. Chen was unconscious, his body finally shutting down from exhaustion. Torres had to be carried, her legs no longer working. Rodriguez sat on a rock, staring at nothing, her hands shaking. Fexnor approached her. She looked up slowly, her eyes taking a moment to focus. "You did well," he said. Rodriguez smiled. It was a terrible smile, exhausted and triumphant at the same time. "We told you we were good at this part," she whispered. Then she collapsed. Medical officers rushed to help her. Thexnor stood in the valley for a long time after the transports left. He looked at the defensive positions the humans had built, the clever traps, the hidden paths, the carefully planned kill zones. He thought about what he had witnessed. Humans were weak individually. They could not match other species in strength or speed or natural armor. But they had something else, something that frightened him more than any weapon. They did not know when to quit. The emergency alarm woke Thexnor at 0300 hours. He grabbed his communicator and saw the priority message. Zelthrix Swarm had launched a major offensive against Coalition supply lines in the Outer Rim. All available units were being deployed immediately. He dressed quickly and headed to the command center. The war games had been 3 weeks ago. Since then, he had watched the humans carefully. They had recovered from their exhaustion, and more importantly, they had earned respect from the other recruits. Even Krath no longer mocked them openly. "Commander," Vex greeted him, "orders have arrived. We are to deploy to Rigel Station with all available forces. The Zelthrix are attacking the main supply route." "What forces do we have ready?" 200 Krellin heavy infantry, 100 Vraxian shock troops, 50 Korthan scouts, and, Vex hesitated, 20 human soldiers. Fexnor looked at the deployment roster. The humans had just completed basic training. They had no combat experience against real enemies. Sending them into battle against the Zelthrix swarm was dangerous, but he needed every soldier. "Deploy everyone. The humans go with my personal battalion." 18 hours later, they arrived at Rigel Station. The situation was worse than reported. The Zelthrix were not just attacking the supply route, they were trying to destroy it completely, cutting off 6 coalition worlds from reinforcements and supplies. Fexnor gathered his officers for briefing. Rodriguez stood with them now, promoted to squad leader after her performance in the war games. "The Zelthrix move in swarms," Fexnor explained, showing tactical maps. "They use numbers to overwhelm defensive positions. Individual Zelthrix are not strong, but they never stop coming. They do not fear death. They do not retreat." "How many are we facing?" Rodriguez asked. "Current estimates, 50,000 in the immediate area, more arriving constantly." The room went quiet. 50,000. Even for experienced coalition forces, those numbers were terrifying. "We will establish defensive positions here, here, and here." Fexnor marked the map. "These 3 points control the supply route. If we lose them, we lose the entire sector. We hold for 72 hours until reinforcements arrive." 72 hours, just like the war games. But this time, the enemy was real. The battalion moved out. Fexnor assigned the humans to Defensive Position Beta, a fortified bunker complex that controlled a key intersection. He put them with a squad of young Krellin warriors, including Vex. Between the humans and Krellins, they had 40 defenders for Position Beta. "Remember," Fexnor told Rodriguez before she left, "the Zelthrix will not stop. You must hold that position no matter what." Rodriguez nodded. Her face was calm, focused. "We understand holding positions, Commander." The first wave hit at 1600 hours. Fexnor watched from the command bunker as the Zelthrix poured across the rocky terrain. They looked like giant insects, each one about 5 feet long, with 6 legs and cutting mandibles. Individually, they were weak. A single warrior could kill dozens, but there were thousands of them. They hit position Alpha first. The Vraxians held the line, their powerful bodies and natural armor letting them fight the Zelthrix in close combat. The sound of battle was deafening. Gunfire, explosions, and the terrible clicking sounds the Zelthrix made. Position Beta came under attack an hour later. Fexnor switched his monitors to Rodriguez's helmet camera. The Zelthrix came like a dark wave across the ground, moving fast, climbing over rocks and each other to reach the human position. There had to be 1,000 in the first wave alone. Hold fire, Rodriguez ordered. Her voice was steady. Wait for optimal range. The Zelthrix got closer. 50 meters. 40. 30. Fire! The defensive line exploded with gunfire. The humans had set up their weapons in overlapping fields of fire, just like in the war games. Zelthrix fell in waves, but more kept coming, climbing over their dead without hesitation. 20 meters. 10. Grenades, Rodriguez commanded. Explosives arced through the air, landing in the thickest groups of Zelthrix. The blast tore through the swarm, but still they came. Then they hit the defensive line. Close combat. Zelthric mandibles against human weapons. Thexnor watched Chen use his rifle like a club, crushing Zelthric bodies. A human woman named Davis fought with a combat knife when her weapon jammed, stabbing at the weak points in Zelthric armor. Vex and his Krellin squad fought alongside the humans. The young Krellin warriors were stronger and better armored, but they watched in amazement as the humans kept fighting without pause, without hesitation. The first wave broke. The Zelthrix retreated, leaving hundreds of bodies. The human defensive line held, but 3 humans were injured. Rodriguez immediately rotated them to the rear for medical treatment and brought fresh soldiers forward. First wave repelled, she reported. Casualties, 3 injured, 0 killed. Ammunition at 70%. Texnor felt relief. They had survived the first attack. Then the second wave came, bigger than the first. 2,000 Zelthrix, maybe more. Here they come again, Rodriguez said calmly. 6 hours passed. Wave after wave of Zelthrix hit position beta. The humans rotated their forces, letting tired soldiers rest while fresh ones took their place. But Thexnor noticed something. The humans rested less than the Krellins. They seemed to need less downtime, less recovery between fights. Hour 12 arrived. Position Alpha reported heavy casualties and requested reinforcements. Position Gamma was holding but running low on ammunition. Position Beta continued fighting. Commander, Vex's voice came over the command channel. You need to see this. Thexnor switched to Vex's camera. The young Krellin was watching the humans with wide eyes. It had been 12 hours of continuous combat. The Krellins were exhausted, rotating squads every 2 hours to maintain effectiveness. But the humans had not rotated. They had been fighting for 12 straight hours, and they showed no signs of stopping. Rodriguez moved along the line, checking her soldiers, offering encouragement. Her uniform was torn and covered in Zelthric blood, but her hands were steady as she reloaded her weapon. Do they ever get tired? Vex asked over a private channel. Thexnor did not answer. He was asking himself the same question. Hour 18. A massive wave hit all 3 positions simultaneously. The Zelthrix had adapted, coordinating their attacks to spread coalition forces thin. At position Beta, a Zelthric broke through the defensive line and injured a Krellin warrior named Drex. The young soldier went down, his leg badly wounded. He lay in the open, unable to move, with Zelthrix swarming toward him. A human medic named Sarah ran forward. She was small, even for a human, barely 5 feet tall. She weighed perhaps 100 pounds, but she did not hesitate. She ran through enemy fire, Zelthric claws missing her by inches. She reached Drex and immediately began treating his wound, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, even as bullets and plasma fire flew around her. Medic down, someone shouted. Sarah had been hit. Thexnor saw the impact on his screen, saw her body jerk as a Zelthric claw caught her side, but she did not stop working. She finished stabilizing Drex's leg, then helped drag him back to the defensive line. Only when Drex was safe did Sarah collapse. Blood spread across her uniform from 3 separate wounds. Get medical to position Beta immediately, Thexnor ordered. Priority transport for their medic. But when the medical transport arrived, Sarah refused to leave. I'm fine, she said, even though she clearly was not. Just patch me up and give me something for the pain. My squad needs me. The medics looked at Rodriguez, who looked at Sarah for a long moment. "Do it," Rodriguez ordered. "Get her back on her feet." 20 minutes later, Sarah was back on the defensive line, bandaged and drugged with painkillers, treating other wounded soldiers. Thexnor had never seen anything like it. A medic who refused evacuation, a soldier who kept fighting with injuries that would have hospitalized most species. Hour 24 arrived, a full day of combat. The Zelthrix had lost thousands, but they kept coming. They did not care about casualties. They did not care about losses. They just kept attacking. Position Alpha fell. The Vraxians had fought brilliantly, but eventually they were overwhelmed by numbers. They conducted a fighting retreat to secondary positions. Position Gamma was barely holding. They were surrounded on 3 sides and running out of ammunition. Only Position Beta held strong. Thexnor studied the tactical map. If Beta fell, the entire defensive line would collapse. The supply route would be cut. 6 worlds would be isolated. "All remaining reserves to Position Beta," he ordered. "That position must hold." But the reserves were 3 hours away, and the next Zelthric wave was already forming. Rodriguez must have heard the order on the command channel. Her voice came over the radio, calm and clear despite 24 hours of continuous combat. "Commander, we will hold. Send the reserves to Gamma. They need help more than we do." "Your position is critical," Thexnor replied. "Yes, sir. That is why we will hold it. Trust us." Thexnor looked at the map. Position Gamma was about to fall. Position Beta was facing its largest attack yet. He had to choose. He made the decision. "Reserves to Gamma," he ordered. Then, on a private channel to Rodriguez, "Do not make me regret this." "You won't, sir." The largest wave yet hit Position Beta. 10,000 Zelthrix, a dark tide that covered the ground like living shadow. The humans did not break. They fought with a calm efficiency that terrified Thexnor more than any battle rage. When weapons overheated, they switched to backup weapons. When ammunition ran low, they used knives and improvised weapons. When positions were overrun, they fell back to prepared secondary positions and kept fighting. Chen held a choke point alone when his squad had to retreat. He killed Zelthrix until his weapon broke, then used the broken pieces as clubs. When he finally fell back, there were over 100 Zelthric bodies in that narrow passage. Hour 36 arrived. Thexnor had not slept. He could not look away from the screens showing Position Beta. The humans had been fighting for 36 continuous hours. They should have collapsed from exhaustion. They should have broken from stress and fear. Instead, they began singing. It started with one voice, Rodriguez, singing something in an Earth language. Then other humans joined in. Even injured ones, even Sarah with her bandaged wounds, sang together while they fought. The sound was strange to Thexnor's ears. Not a war cry or a battle chant, just singing, like they were doing something normal, something easy. Vex's voice came over the command channel, filled with awe. "Commander, I have fought beside Krellans, Vraxians, Korthans. I have never seen anything like this. The humans do not fight like they want to survive. They fight like they have already accepted death and decided to take as many enemies with them as possible." Thexnor watched Rodriguez on screen. She was reloading her weapon, her hands moving automatically from muscle memory. Her face was covered in dust and blood, her eyes red from exhaustion. But she smiled as she sang. And Thexnor realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans were enjoying this. Not the killing, not the violence, but the challenge, the test, the chance to prove themselves. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. Hour 48 arrived with bad news. The Zelthric swarm had brought in massive reinforcements. Intelligence estimated another 100,000 on their way. The entire coalition defensive line was collapsing. Thexnor received orders from High Command, full evacuation. All coalition forces were to retreat to the transport ships. They would abandon the supply route and establish a new defensive line further back. It was the right decision strategically, but it meant 6 worlds would be cut off, left to starve or surrender. Begin evacuation procedures, Thexnor ordered. All forces fall back to extraction points. We have 6 hours to get everyone off planet. The command center erupted in coordinated chaos. Officers shouted orders. Units began moving toward the transport ships. The evacuation had to be perfect, or thousands of soldiers would be left behind. Thexnor pulled up the tactical map. Most positions could retreat safely, but position Beta was different. The humans and Krellans there had held so well that the Zelthrix had concentrated massive forces around them. To retreat, they would have to fight through 10,000 enemies. Many would die in the retreat, maybe all of them. He opened a channel to Rodriguez. Position Beta, this is command. Begin immediate evacuation. Fall back to extraction point Delta. There was a long pause. Then Rodriguez's tired voice replied, Commander, our position is surrounded. If we retreat, the Zelthrix will pursue. They will catch other units during evacuation. I am aware, but those are your orders. Another pause. Thexnor could hear gunfire in the background, the constant sound of battle that had not stopped for 2 days. Commander, request permission to stay behind as rear guard. Thexnor felt his blood go cold. A rear guard in this situation was a death sentence. The soldiers who stayed would have to hold the position while everyone else evacuated. They would face an entire army alone. Denied, he said firmly. All forces are evacuating. Sir, Rodriguez's voice was calm, reasonable. Someone has to cover the evacuation. If the Zelthrix break through and reach the transport ships, everyone dies. We can hold them. We know we can. You will all be killed. Maybe, but everyone else will survive. That is a good trade. Thexnor looked at his officers. They were all listening, their faces shocked. Sacrifice was not unknown in coalition armies, but to volunteer for certain death? That was something else entirely. How many would stay? He asked quietly. All of us, sir. All 20 humans. And, Rodriguez paused, Vex and his Krellans want to stay too. They say they will not leave while we fight. Put Vex on. The young Krellan's voice came over the channel. Commander, the humans are right. Someone must hold this position. I request permission to stay with them. You will die, Vex. Yes, Commander, but I will die with honor, alongside warriors who have earned my respect. Thexnor closed his eyes. He was sending these soldiers to their deaths. 20 humans and 20 Krellans. 40 warriors against 100,000 Zelthrix. But they were right. Someone had to cover the evacuation. Permission granted, he said, his voice heavy. Hold for 6 hours. That is all we need. 6 hours and everyone else gets home safely. Understood, Commander. Position Beta will hold for 6 hours. Thexnor changed channels to address all forces. Attention all units. Begin immediate evacuation to extraction points. Position Beta will serve as rear guard. All other forces proceed with maximum speed. He paused, then added, To the soldiers of Position Beta, the Coalition will remember your sacrifice. You have my respect and gratitude. Fight well. Rodriguez's response was simple. We will, sir. Beta out. The evacuation began. Thousands of soldiers moved toward the transport ships, fighting through smaller Zelthric groups, rushing to get off-world before the main swarm arrived. Thexnor watched Position Beta on his monitors. He could not look away. These soldiers were dying for him, for the Coalition, and he would witness their last stand. The first hour was brutal. The Zelthrix, sensing the Coalition retreat, threw everything at Position Beta. Wave after wave crashed against the human defensive line. The humans transformed the position into a fortress of death. They used every trick they had learned, every tactic they had practiced. Explosives hidden in the rocks, sniper positions in impossible locations, kill zones that channeled the Zelthrix into concentrated fire. Chen held the eastern approach with 5 other humans. When a Zelthric broke through and injured one of his squad mates, Chen personally carried the wounded soldier back to the medical area, then returned to the line immediately. Sarah, still wounded from earlier, moved between positions, treating injuries. She worked with calm efficiency, even as the defensive perimeter shrank around her. Vex and his Krellans fought alongside the humans, and Thexanor saw something remarkable. The Krellans had learned from the humans. They fought smarter now, using cover and tactics instead of just relying on their natural armor. They had become better warriors by fighting alongside humans. Hour 2 arrived. A massive explosion rocked the position. A human specialist named Kim had stayed behind in a damaged building to manually detonate explosives. She waited until 2,000 Zelthrix were in the kill zone, then triggered the charges. The entire building collapsed, taking the Zelthrix with it. Kim's life signs went flat. "Kim is gone," Rodriguez reported, her voice tight with emotion. "But she took out the eastern attack route. They cannot use it anymore." 19 humans left, 20 Krellans, against 100,000 enemies. Hour 3. The defensive perimeter was shrinking. The humans fell back to prepared secondary positions, using the terrain to slow the Zelthric advance. They moved with practiced efficiency, each soldier covering the other's retreat. Then Thexanor heard something that made his blood run cold. The humans were singing again, but this time it was different. Not battle songs or marching songs. These were slow, sad songs. Songs about home and memory and loss. They sang like they were at a funeral, their own funeral. "Why do they sing?" an officer asked. Thexanor understood. "They are saying goodbye to each other, to us, to life." Hour 4. The Zelthrix sensed weakness. They poured in from all sides, an ocean of claws and mandibles. The defensive line was now just a small cluster of positions around the central bunker. A human named Williams held a sniper position on high ground. He eliminated Zelthric after Zelthric with calm precision. When they finally overwhelmed his position, he switched to a pistol and fought hand-to-hand. He marked 18 casualties before falling. 18 humans left. Torres, the human who had held the thermal vent position during the war games, set up a machine gun in a narrow pass. She held that pass alone for 45 minutes, creating a wall of fire that nothing could pass through. When her weapon finally overheated and failed, she used grenades. When the grenades ran out, she fixed a bayonet. The Zelthrix buried her position. 17 humans left. Hour 5. Thexnor's communicator showed the evacuation progress, 95% complete. Almost everyone was off-planet, just 30 more minutes. Position Beta was dying. The humans and Krellans were down to their last defensive position, a small bunker complex that should have held maybe 10 warriors. They had 37 soldiers crammed into a space meant for 10. "Commander," Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Evacuation status? 95%, 30 minutes. We can give you 30 minutes. But Thexanor could see the tactical display. The Zelthrix were massing for a final assault. 50,000 of them, surrounding the bunker from all sides. There was no way 37 soldiers could hold against those numbers. The assault began. It was not a wave. It was a tsunami. 50,000 Zelthrix hitting the bunker from every direction at once. The humans and Krellans fought like demons. They had no ammunition left, only melee weapons and improvised tools. They fought in the bunker doorways, in the corridors, in the rooms. Anywhere the Zelthrix came, they met blades and fists in determination. Vex fell protecting a wounded human. 3 Zelthrix overwhelmed him, and he went down fighting, his last words a battle cry in the Krellan language. Chen held a corridor alone, his body blocking the passage. He fought with a broken rifle as a club. When that broke, he used his fists. When he finally fell, 12 Zelthric bodies surrounded him. Sarah, The medic who had refused evacuation died treating a wounded Krellin. She never stopped trying to save others, even as the Zelthrix reached her position. One by one, the life signs went dark. One by one, the defenders fell. Thexnor watched in horror and awe. These soldiers did not run. They did not surrender. They fought until they physically could not fight anymore, and then they kept fighting. The timer showed 28 minutes. Almost there. Almost everyone was evacuated. Rodriguez was the last human standing. She stood in the central bunker, surrounded by bodies of friends and enemies, her back against the wall. Her weapon was gone. She held only a combat knife. The Zelthrix poured into the bunker. "Commander," Rodriguez said, her voice somehow still calm. "Evacuation complete?" 98%. 2 minutes. Rodriguez laughed. It was a tired, broken sound, but still somehow defiant. "Then we held long enough. Good." The Zelthrix reached her position. Thexnor tried to look away but could not. He watched as Rodriguez raised her knife, ready to fight to her very last breath. Then something unexpected happened. Thexnor's command shuttle fired its engines. He was moving before his conscious mind made the decision. "What are you doing?" his pilot demanded. "Get me to position beta, maximum speed." "Commander, that is suicide." "Do it, now." The shuttle screamed through the atmosphere, faster than safety protocols allowed. Thexnor grabbed a weapon and moved to the boarding ramp. "Sir, we cannot land. The area is too hot." "Then hover, low as you can." The shuttle dropped into the valley. Thexnor could see position beta below, swarming with Zelthrix. The bunker was completely overrun. "Fire all weapons," he ordered. "Clear a path." The shuttle's guns opened up, cutting through the Zelthrix swarm. Thexnor did not wait for a clear landing zone. He jumped from the moving shuttle, his 4 arms holding weapons, and hit the ground, firing. He fought his way to the bunker. Inside, he found Rodriguez still standing, still fighting, covered in blood and wounds, but somehow still alive. 3 other humans were there too, and 5 Krellins, all on their feet, but barely. "Extraction complete," Thexnor announced. "Everyone on the shuttle, now." Rodriguez stared at him like she could not believe what she was seeing. "You came back." "Move, soldier. That is an order." They ran for the shuttle, the survivors carrying their wounded. Thexnor covered their retreat, firing continuously. The shuttle lifted off with Zelthrix clinging to its hull. As they climbed toward space, Thexnor looked at Rodriguez. She sat on the deck, breathing hard, her hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. "You held for 6 hours," he said quietly. Rodriguez nodded. "We said we would." "You were ready to die." "Yes, sir, but not because we wanted to, because it was necessary, because it meant everyone else lived." Thexnor looked at the other survivors. 3 humans, 5 Krellins, out of 40 defenders. They had held. Against impossible odds, against an army, they had held long enough for everyone else to escape. "Rodriguez," he said. "Sir, the coalition owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Rodriguez smiled weakly. "Just doing our job, Commander. Just doing what humans do." And Thexnor finally understood. Humans were not strong. They were not fast. They were not naturally armored. But they had something no other species possessed: the absolute, unshakable will to fight, even when victory was impossible, to sacrifice themselves so others could live, to hold the line no matter the cost. That was worth more than any natural weapon. 3 months had passed since the evacuation. Thexnor stood before the Galactic Council, the highest authority in the coalition. Representatives from 20 species filled the grand chamber, their attention focused on him. He had been summoned to make a report about the human soldiers. The council was debating what to do with humanity's military forces. Some wanted to expand human recruitment, others wanted to limit it, and some wanted to ban humans from combat roles entirely. "Commander Thexnor," the council speaker began, an ancient Brel whose armor was covered in honor scars. You have spent more time with human soldiers than any other officer. You were there at Rigel Station. You witnessed their actions. The council wishes to hear your assessment. Thexnor stepped forward. He had prepared his report carefully, reviewing all the data, all the recordings, all the evidence. But now, standing before the council, he decided to speak from his heart instead. When humans first arrived at my training facility, I thought they were the weakest species I had ever seen. I was correct. Physically, humans are weak. They rank near the bottom in every measurable category: strength, speed, durability, sensory capability. Any warrior from any species in this chamber could defeat a human in single combat. He paused, letting that sink in. But I was also wrong, because I was measuring the wrong things. Thexnor activated the holographic display. It showed footage from the war games, from the defense of Rigel Station, from 100 different moments of human soldiers in action. Humans evolved differently than we did. Most of our species evolved as predators or as heavily defended prey. We developed natural weapons, armor, strength. We needed these things to survive on our worlds. The display showed Earth, a blue and green world, beautiful and seemingly peaceful. Humans evolved on a world with no natural defenses. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. They were slow compared to predators on their world. They were weak. By all logic, they should have died out millions of years ago. But they did not die, the council speaker observed. No, they adapted in a different way. They developed persistence. On Earth, humans hunted by chasing prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They called it persistence hunting. The human would track an animal, chase it, and never stop chasing it. The prey would be faster and stronger, but eventually it would tire. The human would not. Thexnor showed footage from the war games, humans fighting for 67 hours without rest. This adaptation did not go away. Humans can function for days without sleep, pushing their bodies far beyond what should be possible. They use chemical stimulants and sheer willpower to override their body's natural limits. A Vraxian counselor raised a claw. This is impressive, but hardly unique. Many species can fight for extended periods. Yes, Thexnor agreed, but humans do something else, something I have never seen in any other species. He showed new footage. Sarah, the human medic, running through enemy fire to save a wounded Krellin. Then Chen holding a corridor alone. Then Rodriguez leading her final stand. Humans have developed pack bonding to an extreme degree. Most species bond with their own kind. Humans bond with everything. They bonded with the animals on their world, domesticating creatures that should have been their predators. They bond with their machines, giving them names and personalities. And most importantly, they bond with other species as if we were their own kind. He showed footage of Sarah treating Vex, the wounded Krellin. Her face showed pain from her own injuries, but also fierce determination to save her patient. Sarah died saving Vex. She had known him for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and she considered him family worth dying for. This is not normal behavior. This is uniquely human. The chamber was silent. Every counselor was watching the footage. Humans have another adaptation, Thexnor continued. Spite. Spite? The council speaker asked. The willingness to accept costs in order to hurt an enemy. Most species fight to survive. If survival becomes impossible, they surrender or flee. This is logical. But humans have a concept they call, if I am going down, I am taking you with me. They will accept their own death to ensure their enemy also dies. He showed footage of Kim, the human specialist who had blown up the building on herself to destroy 2,000 Zelthrix. Kim knew she would die. She chose to die. Not because she wanted to, but because her death would save others. This is what humans call a suicide mission. They have a word for it because they do it often enough to need a word. A Korthan counselor spoke up, his voice troubled. Commander, You are describing a species that is self-destructive and dangerous. Why should we allow them in our military? Fexnor had expected this question, because they are only destructive to themselves for the benefit of others. Humans do not seek death. They seek purpose. They seek to protect those they consider family, and they have decided that the coalition is family. He pulled up casualty statistics. At Rigel Station, human forces represented 1% of our total deployment. They suffered 35% casualties, but their actions allowed 98% of all coalition forces to evacuate safely. 1% of our forces saved 98%. The mathematics of sacrifice. The council speaker leaned forward. You are arguing that humans should be expanded within our military? I am arguing that humans should be understood. They are not like us. They do not think like us. They fight in ways that seem illogical or suicidal. Fexnor showed the final footage. Position Beta, the last stand, 40 soldiers against 100,000 enemies. But they win. Not always for themselves. Often they die in their victories. But they achieve the objective. They hold the line. They save their comrades. They complete the mission, even when the mission is impossible. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I have studied human military history. It is horrifying. Humans have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. They have fought more wars than any species in the coalition database. They have developed thousands of tactics and strategies. They have refined warfare into what they call an art form. The display showed human wars throughout history, ancient battles with swords, medieval sieges, modern conflicts with advanced weapons. But here is what is important. They learned all of this fighting each other, human against human. They became experts at defeating opponents who think like them, who fight like them, who are just as determined and stubborn and unwilling to quit. Fexnor looked around the chamber. Every species here evolved to fight other species on their worlds. We learned to fight creatures different from ourselves. Humans learned to fight themselves. They learned to fight enemies who were just as clever, just as adaptable, just as unwilling to surrender. And they survived. That is what makes them dangerous. Dangerous to the coalition? A counselor asked nervously. Dangerous to our enemies, Fexnor corrected. Humans are loyal to an extreme degree. Once they give their word, they keep it. Earth joined the coalition 3 months ago. In that time, 23 human soldiers died protecting coalition forces. They barely know us. We barely know them. But they fought and died for us anyway. He showed one final image. Rodriguez standing among the bodies of her fallen soldiers, still fighting, still refusing to quit. This is Rodriguez. When I ordered evacuation, she volunteered to stay behind so others could escape. She knew she would die. She accepted it. When I asked her why, she said, "Someone has to hold the line, and we are good at this part." The chamber was completely silent now. Humans are good at the parts of war that other species avoid. The impossible missions, the suicide runs, the last stands. They are good at these things because they do not see them as impossible. They see them as problems to solve, challenges to overcome. Fexnor deactivated the display and faced the council directly. You asked for my assessment. Here it is. Humans are the weakest species in the coalition by every physical measure. They are also the most dangerous soldiers I have ever seen. Not because they are strong or fast or well-armored, but because they do not know when to quit, because they bond with everyone they fight beside, because they will die before they break. He drew himself up to full attention. I recommend we establish a human special operations division. Give them the missions other species cannot accomplish. The missions that require not just strength or skill, but absolute, unshakable determination. Let humans do what humans do best. The council speaker conferred with other counselors in quiet tones. Then he turned back to Fexnor. This is highly unusual. We have never established a species-specific division before. Humans are highly unusual, Thexnor replied, more conferring. Then the council speaker nodded. Very well. The council approves the formation of the 1st Human Special Operations Battalion. You will command this unit, Commander Thexnor. Select your personnel and begin training immediately. Thexnor bowed. Thank you, Council. I accept this responsibility. As the session ended and counselors began filing out, the old Brel speaker approached Thexnor privately. You care about these humans, the speaker observed. Yes, Thexnor admitted. I did not expect to. I thought they were weak. I thought they would fail. But they did not. No, they did not. And now? Thexnor paused, searching for words. Now I understand what true strength is. It is not the power to fight. It is the will to fight even when you cannot win. The determination to stand even when you should fall. That is what humans have. That is what they will teach the rest of us. 2 weeks later, Thexnor stood before the 1st Human Special Operations Battalion. They had promoted Rodriguez to lieutenant commander. Chen was now a squad leader. The survivors from Rigel Station stood in the front row, wearing new uniforms with a new insignia, a human hand holding a defensive line. Behind them stood 200 more human soldiers, fresh recruits eager to prove themselves. Thexnor raised his voice to address them all. You have been called the weakest species in the coalition. You have been mocked and doubted and underestimated. Some still believe you do not belong in combat roles. He paused, looking at each face. But I have fought beside you. I have watched you hold lines that should have broken. I have seen you sacrifice yourselves for others. I have witnessed your determination, your loyalty, your absolute refusal to surrender. He drew his ceremonial blade, a Krellin tradition for honoring warriors. You are not weak. You are wounded prey that learned to hunt predators. You are soft creatures that survived on a harsh world by becoming harder than your environment. You are the species that turned survival into an art form and warfare into a science. He raised the blade in salute. And now you fight for us. Now you stand with the coalition. Now you hold the line against enemies that threaten all of us. You give your word to protect us, and humans always keep their word. The battalion stood at attention, silent and focused. Welcome to the 1st Human Special Operations Battalion. You will face impossible missions. You will be asked to do things other species cannot. You will hold lines that should not be held. You will fight battles that should not be won. Thexnor smiled, showing his teeth. And you will succeed, because that is what humans do. Rodriguez stepped forward and saluted. Behind her, 200 voices spoke as one. We will hold the line, Commander, always. Far away in the depths of Zelthric-controlled space, the swarm's hive mind processed new information. Their scouts had encountered more human units. The encounters had gone badly. The hive mind analyzed the data. Humans were weak individually, but they fought with coordination and determination that made them far more dangerous than their physical capabilities suggested. They used terrain cleverly. They employed tactics the Zelthrics had never seen. They did not break under pressure. Most importantly, they did not retreat. Ever. Even when obviously defeated, humans would fight to the last soldier. This made them unpredictable and costly to fight. The hive mind reached a conclusion and transmitted it to all Zelthric forces across the sector. Avoid human units when possible. When contact is unavoidable, expect high casualties. The soft skins do not break. Back on the Coalition training facility, Chen stood beside Vex. The Krellin had recovered from his injuries and requested transfer to the human battalion. Your people do not understand us, Vex said quietly, but they will learn. Chen nodded. And we will learn from you. That is the point of the Coalition, yes? Different species, different strengths, working together? Yes, but humans bring something new, something we did not know we needed. What is that? Vex thought about Sarah, the human medic who died saving him. He thought about Rodriguez and her squad standing their ground against impossible odds. He thought about the humans singing as they fought, calm in the face of death. Hope, Vex said finally. Humans bring hope. When the situation is impossible, when logic says we should surrender, when all seems lost, humans do not give up. And if they will not give up, then neither will we. Chen smiled. Then we will stand together, human and Krellin, and the line will hold. Always, Vex agreed. And across the coalition, that word spread. In every language, every dialect, every form of communication, soldiers learned the human promise. The line will hold, always, because humans said so, and humans kept their word.